Questions about water and its uses are common throughout Africa. For millions of people in villages and cities, the shortage of clean water is a persistent and growing reality. The crisis of drought in the Sahel in recent years has underscored the importance of water resource programs. In order to improve the quality of life of African people, long-range planning is needed to deal with fundamental causes of drought. In the Cape Verde Islands, there is an old expression, "Naunteng Tchuva, naunteng Tchuva." Without rain, there is no hope. For the 300,000 inhabitants of these normally dry and mountainous islands, life is difficult enough. More than 10 years of severe drought has put additional obstacles in the way of their hopes for development as a newly independent nation and a proud people. In order to overcome its difficulties, many agricultural and land use practices, often based on old colonial principles of exploitation and neglect, are giving way to different forms which, instead, serve the needs of the Cape Verdean people. Armed with a better understanding of their environment, they are beginning to employ new methods and tools in their struggle. In a land where the words for rain and hope are the same, their determined effort and the contributions of those who support their aspirations are building a new life. Water development in Africa is a special concern of Church World Service. Canon Robert Powell is director of the Africa office.
Church World Service is one of the several units of the National Council of Churches Division of Overseas Ministries. Our particular function relates to relief, rehabilitation, and development. We have been working in Africa for over 20 years now, reflecting the concerns of the American church community for the persons in need on the continent of Africa. A wide variety of programs constitute a part of our work. Principal among them recently has been a concern for water resource development. A good example of the kind of development orientation Church World Service engages itself in Africa is the water development project in which we were involved in Cape Verde. The circumstances there are such that the need for water is a pervasive one. We have taken this project as an example of the kinds of applications modern technology, appropriate to the culture in which it is to be used, can be applied to assist in developing an improved quality of life for the people of this country. But rather than try to tell you more about it, I'd like to show it to you. We're going to use the medium of a video cassette and take you there.
The Republic of Cape Verde is a former Portuguese colony. It lies in the Sahel, that band of drought which crosses the African continent. Its 10 volcanic islands are home for 300,000 people, most of whom are peasant farmers struggling to eke out an existence. Although people have lived here for 500 years, Cape Verdeans have almost no natural energy supplies, few minerals, and rarely enough rain to support the agricultural economy in which most of its people subsist. Today, most food must be imported. Linneo Miranda, a government official, shows us an example of Cape Verde's colonial legacy in agriculture. Farmers here have learned to deal with their environment as best they can, tilling small plots in crowded and badly eroded valleys. While some gardens could be watered by small springs or from shallow, hand-dug wells, most crop growth has been tied to a single, short, and unpredictable rainy season. In colonial times, few people received training oriented towards problems in the islands. Even so, Cape Verde's technicians today believe their country can be changed for the better. Manuel Rodrigues is an electrical engineer who has taught himself about agriculture for that very reason.
It's necessary to know our conditions.
Because it is so critical to agricultural development, Rodrigues has also given attention to the water situation in Cape Verde.
We don't had last year a recult, but a lot of water went to the sea. Even in dry time, we have always rain. The water is under. We must reach that water, profit that water. Indeed, agricultures don't have credit, don't have money, don't have devices, motors, any kind of pumps, profiting oil energy or the wind energy. We need help, technical help to profit all that, even help to profit better the land we have, the water we have, and perhaps a lot of help knowing well where the water is in Cape Verde.
Engineer Rodrigues raises some of Cape Verde's most important development questions. Where is the water in Cape Verde? How much can be safely used, and how will the people find the means to get it and use it well? With the coming of Cape Verdean independence in 1975, technical experts from around the world began to arrive to help provide the assistance Cape Verde so badly needed. One of these experts was Mr. Dennis Fernando Pule, a Sri Lankan working with the United Nations. He surveyed the islands to determine their water potential. Based on his experience doing similar work in the Canary Islands, a program of test drillings and complex analysis of rainfall patterns, geology, and water use requirements began. It was discovered that, properly managed, enough water exists deep below the surface to supply both domestic needs and limited but important agricultural projects. But establishing a meaningful groundwater program takes more than simply drilling a few holes in the ground. Water resources must be integrated with numerous social factors, such as population, the economy, and land use practices. Mr. Fernando Pule considers these factors in proposing new approaches to Cape Verdean water and agriculture problems.
Most agriculture, present agriculture, is practiced, in fact, at the bottom of the valleys. Now, during the last few decades, there has been such an amount of pressure, population pressure on this land, on the limited amount of land, that the plots have become very small. Now, most of the people who cannot work on this land are forced to leave the land too. There is definitely a problem, the relationship between land, water, and the human group. Our proposition has been to develop also the plateau areas between valleys, which call the ashadas. Now, not all the ashadas are in fact suitable for development, but we have been able to select some of them for immediate development. We are going to expand the agriculturally usable surface.
The project at Achada San Felipe is a far-reaching experiment. Although the land is fertile, there is no surface water.
The whole project is based, in fact, on groundwater investigation. We had already made a study of groundwater investigation, and we have found the water.
The cost of water is closely tied to the expense of pumping it from the ground.
We are trying to make an example of pumping using renewable energy.
The high cost of imported fuel makes the use of renewable energy systems for pumping very attractive for Cape Verde. Supported by funds from a number of sources, the project team has constructed a field test site for a variety of wind and solar energy machines. It is also a training site where Cape Verdeans can learn to operate the machines and are taught more effective agricultural methods. Church World Service contributed a number of windmill pumps to this project at Mr. Fernando Poulet's request.
I was very grateful, in fact, of the contact that I had with the Church World Service here, right here in New York. And they provided us, without even asking the question, immediately with about 20, I think 25, in fact, Dempster windmills, which are practically all installed at the moment. These Dempster windmills had been extremely handy for us, especially for pumping on very shallow wells and giving water for certain small population groups and livestock.
Already in its second phase, this project is now providing water to several small communities and good experience for future development efforts.
The windmills are in place in Cape Verde. They are functioning and the project continues. One of the concerns as a result of our involvement in Cape Verde, and to some degree that anticipated it, is that as we deploy appropriate technology among the peoples of Africa, we assure ourselves and them that the use of that technology, and especially of any hardware that is made available, can be maintained by them rather than by continuing personnel coming from outside to do that job for them. Church World Service became interested in this aspect of education and instruction earlier on as we related to a group of young men who undertook a major project of the development of instructional video cassettes. After a comprehensive tour of manufacturers and erection sites in the United States, they have produced for us a series of instructional cassettes which we use to share with our colleagues overseas to show how to erect and maintain such hardware as the windmills you've just seen. As an example of that medium of instruction, I'd like to show you an excerpt from one of those tapes.
The farmers who put up this windmill don't have to live close by it. They were able to place it out in the fields where their cattle graze. One thing they like about these machines is that they don't burn any expensive petrol. The wind does all the work. Another good thing is that they're pretty simple and well constructed. They only need a little attention to keep doing their job. This one here has been pumping water for cattle since 1940. Whenever they go to look after their livestock, the farmers also give a quick look at the windmill. Every month they check the bolts and braces to make sure nothing is coming loose. Once a year, the oil in the top of the windmill gets changed. That's the most important thing you can do to give your windmill a long life. The oil keeps the gears inside the mill's head from wearing out too fast. The fellows doing the work are Ron Lale and his friend Byron. There are so many windmills around where Ron lives that he and his father earn their living doing these big jobs. After 40 years, this machine is being taken to the workshop for rebuilding. It takes some special tools to replace the gears, but then the machine will be as good as new. Because their work is well respected, they also get asked to do a lot of simpler, routine setup and repair work. Having all the tools and the truck makes his work go fast, but Ron says that it's really knowing how to do it that makes the jobs easier. One of the most common things to break down on the windmill is underground, in the pump itself. After a year or two, especially if there's any sand in the water, some parts inside the pump cylinder start to wear. Then, no matter how hard the windmill works, more and more water slips past the piston until very little gets pushed up the pipe to the surface. That's the problem with this windmill. First thing, Ron shut the windmill off and disconnected it from the pump rod. Then he began to pull the pipe up from the well. Doing this job doesn't take many tools. Although Ron has a hydraulic winch to lift the pipe, a strong hand winch or a block and tackle will do just as well. Two devices hold on to the pipe, one for the lifting cable and one at the top of the well hole. This one is very important because it keeps the entire string of pipe from dropping into the well. There are many different tools you could use, including some you can make yourself. Just be certain that the cable and holding tools are strong enough to support the weight of all the pipe in the well. As each length of pipe comes out of the well, Ron unscrews it and the jet rod inside.
You have more problems with this than you do with the actual mechanism of the windmill.
Yeah. Yeah, you gotta either replace pipes, jet rod, or couplings, or leathers. This is where the main trouble is on them.
How often do you have to repair something like this?
Usually once or twice every 2 years.
He usually cleans and sometimes rethreads the rod so he can put a new, unrusted coupling on later. He repeats this until the pump cylinder itself is pulled up. Look at this. The water in the pipe is leaking from a hole where the pipe rusted and broke. He'll have to fix that too. The old leathers on the piston are very badly worn and have to be replaced. Ron inspects the inside of the pump cylinder for small cracks. They also check the valves for damage, even though they normally last a long time. Ron and Byron now cut and rethread the piece of pipe which was leaking. Soon they'll reverse what they just did, putting the pump and all the pipe back in the well. Before the sun is set, this windmill will be pumping water again, and Ron and Byron will be home with their families.
You have seen several uses of video cassettes as a medium of communication. Churchwell Service intends to develop this medium for various purposes. We would like to be able to report to our colleagues overseas the various kinds of programs in which we're involved. An example has been the Cape Verde project. We would like to share information among our colleagues so that those persons working in water resource development in Nigeria and those in Madagascar will know what the successes and failures of each other's program might be, so that we could cross-fertilize, if you will, the kinds of development technology that can be made available through such an organization as Churchwell Service. We would also want to use these cassettes to inform our donors at home and the people who comprise the American Christian community, so that they would know what is being done with their resources in their name among other people in the Christian community, especially in Africa. We also find that to have a record of our involvement, a kind of video archive, if you will, provides a history of the development of Churchwell Service operations in this part of the world. Each of these represents a valuable use of a valuable tool.